Welcome, Sarah. We're really honored and privileged to have you here. So, to begin with, tell us a little bit about Genentech, which is now part of Roche.
Yeah, thanks, Dipti, and thanks for inviting me. So Genentech is a biotech company which essentially started the biotech industry in the mid-70s, and today is part of the global Roche organization. Roche is one of the top pharmaceutical companies in the world, but Genentech is still the US entity, still very focused in delivery of new medicines and targeted medicines, as well as personalized medicines for a number of diseases.
That's great. It's really great to see a biotech company going into pharmaceuticals. And I recently read that global pharmaceutical sales are at 1 trillion US dollars. And the US contributes more than 450 billion in revenue. I'm sure Genentech and Roche is a significant portion of that. And cutting edge technologies such as AI, blockchain, robotics are steadily transforming drug R&D, pharmaceutical logistics, and drug distribution by leveraging data and improving inefficient workflows. It would be great to hear from you. So can you tell us how you or Genentech is leveraging these technologies in the development programs that you run?
Yeah, no, clearly. I mean, I think as the world is becoming more and more digital, the utilization of those technologies across the industry is growing. There's simply no doubt about that. And I mean, I see it as sort of two-pronged, right? It's growing, one, in terms of just enabling the day-to-day, the work that happens. So that's through enabling our workflows, enabling how data, for example, gets collected, how it gets managed, assembled, curated, how we then use those data sets, right? And being able for the scientists to be able to seamlessly do their science in a way where the digital technology is actually aiding their ability to do the science. So that's one thread, right? We want digitalization to actually enable the scientists to do the best science that they're here for. On the other hand, we also want to use new digital methods and technologies to actually impact drug development and to impact the discovery of new drugs as well as the development of new drugs. And that shows up in a multiple different places from, at least in the R&D world. You can imagine that we are using advanced computational techniques. You brought up AI and machine learning, but it also extends from things like bioinformatic techniques and modeling and simulation. I mean, when you think about our industry, with the human genome being really sort of out there in the last few years, the amount of data that we generate, both preclinically as well as, from our patients, et cetera, the sort of the depth of the data, the type of data, the scale of data, everything has changed. And so we are now seeing utilization of these kinds of technologies in our ability to actually go in depth into those data sets, to analyze them, and to see what insights we can get. So for me, I'm seeing technologies really entering our industry in two major ways. One is in solving the life of the scientists and helping them to do better science. And two is to actually, enable better discoveries and to develop drugs better.
That's really good. That's a great overview. I was wondering, would you be able to share a specific example, maybe, to get the audience? Our audience is mostly technology geeks, I would say, and engineers and professionals. And maybe it'll be good for them to see a flavor of how a specific technology is being used. Would you be able to share a specific example?
Yeah, I definitely can. So if you now think about, let's talk first about this enabling science, and sometimes that's like the less interesting, because people are you apply AI to get better insights. But I'll come to that. But when you think about, digitalizing the workflows and digitalizing lab operations and digitalizing how we collect data, that could have a tremendous difference in our ability to actually do what we ultimately want to do, which is get depths, of insights of biology, do better drug discovery, etc. So a couple of examples on that area, right? So one of the big challenges is, since scientists for years have been working in labs where they take notes on their lab notebooks. They have this sort of practice of writing everything that happened in their experiments and their results and doing everything in lab notebooks. And there's a mindset change that's happening, which is essentially like with today's technology, you don't need to do that. You can use electronic lab notebooks, but if you do it consistently, right? And if you then do this consistently, the value is not only to you in terms of actually making your work easier, but there is a secondary value which a scientist may not see at that time. And that secondary value is using this data sets for a secondary use. So they may get an answer to their experiment, but at some point you would be able to put data together if they were all electronically available, accessible, findable, etc., so that then they could be used to ask some other question, like, is there a trend here between X that was done, Y that was done, and A? But if you can't find X, Y, and A without actually asking those people, you have a problem. So that's like a simple, what sounds maybe very simple, but in our world, if that hasn't been now it's found, and this is something a lot of companies are grappling with, we have so much data from our patients, but the data sets are in silos in terms of for that particular program, for that particular study. And if you were to sort of say, hey, we have now looked at over the last 30 years programs of this type, what did we find? It's really hard to put these data sets together because they originally weren't created and sort of organized in a way that they could just be zipped together, right? And we want to be able to zip those things together. And now prospectively, we are beginning to do that. But in those days, we weren't able to do it. So you can see that technology is playing a big role now to actually get this together, because there might be some real valuable insights in those data that we never tapped into. We only asked the primary question. And the same is true on the application side, right? We are trying to use novel technologies and digital technologies, both as like biomarkers in our trials that will tell us if drugs are working, as well as to mine these data sets that I just talked about to look for those insights, and to look for what it's telling you beyond that primary question.
That's great. It's really amazing how when you aggregate the data, 1 + 1 makes 11 as opposed to 2. So that's great, and we all can relate to it. We came from that research background, so that's a great overview of what you're doing at Genentech. But outside of Genentech, throughout the industry as a whole, what are the trends that you are noticing?
Yeah, I think some of these things that I just talked about are actual pain points and also areas and advances that I'm seeing across industry, right? I think everybody wants to make sure that our data is findable, this verification of data, findable, accessible, readable, etc., is really important. And I'm seeing that across the industry, which I think is a great trend, because our ability to organize data in a way where you can actually do these things is fantastic. I'm also seeing more and more utilization of digital tools in healthcare. Even if you look at the way healthcare and the healthcare industry is changing, right? Even our experience as a patient when you go to the doctor's office, then the number of tools that are becoming digital are having an impact in our pharmaceutical industry too. So, for example, our clinical trials, we are trying to make sure that the tools we use during our clinical trials, whether it's the access to the patient, or the incorporation of endpoints, etc., even those getting them to a fully digitized state would make a huge difference for patients and for us, right? And that's happening across the industry. And then finally, the use of a lot of experimentation is happening with sort of advanced analytic tools like AI, machine learning, etc. I think the jury's out as to which areas it will be the most helpful, but clearly, as is happening across, for example, with imaging endpoints, you're seeing that radiologic imaging or digital pathology are areas where more and more, as you can digitize images, etc., our ability to find insights from them, as well as to just quantitate things you already know, is going to be very important. And as that changes, that has an effect on our industry too. And we want to be part of that evolution that's happening.
So true. I mean, advocate of bringing technology and healthcare together. And we've gone through so many cycles, right? Remember in the 80s, we thought, oh my God, AI, that's going to transform. And then same thing happened in 2000. Finally, I think it's there to stick, right? So all technologies go through a hype cycle followed by reality.
Yes.
So
yes.
where do you see intelligent technologies panning out in the pharma industry? We talked a little bit about it, but what, in your opinion, are the limitations today? Where do you see the challenges?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, to me, I think one, at least for the pharma industry, one challenge is still the data, right? You can have all the technologies you want in terms of analytic tools, but if you don't have your data sets, the right data sets, right? And by that, I don't just even mean the structure of the data, but the actual collection of the data. Because remember, our technologies of collecting the data are also changing. The assays we use today to do a particular analysis is not the same assay you used 10 years ago. So then you have to ask the question about comparability of those data and whether you really, all the data that you have are actually the same data. And can you really compare something from a trial 10 years ago to a trial today? So there are complexities that you need to think about around the data that makes this next question, which is application of the tools, very challenging. So that's number one. Number two is, I think the proof will be in the pudding. I think I'm seeing that there's a lot going on in the industry around using AI on drug discovery, for example, where if you could do a lot of data generation in vitro, etc., and then by AI tools, perhaps fast forward the speed of which we do drug discovery, right? That's know yet if we'll do that, but to use AI and machine learning towards drug discovery. So clearly that's one thread. The other one is with our patient data, really looking for insights from our patient data, applying AI algorithms to imaging endpoints or to digital endpoints. But all of that is, the caveat is data, high quality data, large scale data, and really being able to get that data set, good data set that'll allow you to use that tool. So yes, hype, I think it's still in that early cycle. We are beginning to get more data, so I think it's getting a little bit more real than it was 10 years ago. I think the algorithms are also changing, so that's wonderful. But now, will we see like real results? We'll say, X, Y, and Z are the places that it really helped us, discover a new drug, for example. For me, that's where the proof is in my industry. Like, can you find a new target? Can you find a new drug? And that's not that simple. But clearly it's good. We always want as many tools that we can find. This is one avenue that the industry is going to look into for sure.
So wow, lots of fascinating avenues for people who are in software technology, looking to go into healthcare and provide solutions over there. Let me see if I have some more questions out here from the audience that we can incorporate in this. And this is great. I mean, we could go on. Instead of 20 minutes, we could do this for 2 hours.